My name is Ken. Welcome to the Aviation Podcast presented by Gulf Coast Aerial Connection. Today, we have Mr. Jake Cook. Hello, Mr. Cook. How are you?
Ken, doing fantastic. Thanks for having me back, man. It's a pleasure.
No problem, no problem. I'm glad you wanted to come back and talk with us. We didn't scare you off or anything, but
Absolutely not. No, I had a great time, and I think I enjoyed the outdoor in person a little bit more. But this is just as good.
great. No, absolutely. We were talking just before the show here, and we already want to get together, do this again. It's been a blast, so we don't want to keep everybody waiting. We want to get into the podcast today. We have a few things we want to cover. Here at the Aviation Podcast, we are going to cover as much as we can. If it flies, if it is in the national airspace, we want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. We want to share. We want to hear from you. And so let's get into it. The FAA, that's where a lot of us have to start, right? So in the FAA's newsroom, you take a look at some of their last few articles. One that got my attention, and I didn't know if you had heard about this, Jake. Down here, FAA proposes $1.1 million fine against United Airlines for allegedly not performing maintenance inspections.
Inspections, plural. I haven't heard of this one. $1.1 million fine, though, I think suits the bill at least, but that stuff's scary to think about, especially, and I kind of like growing up getting into aviation, you kind of just blindly trust the FAA, all these big companies, corporations. I think the last few years maybe have highlighted that you shouldn't do that. But for example, like the Boeing 747 incident happened early 2020. I don't know if you ever saw the documentary that came out about after that, where there might have been some corners that got cut knowingly in the manufacturing process because it's a big money-making factor, right? Like we got to fit these planes out there. We got to keep them in the air. And up at that level, there is a lot of needs that need to be met in terms of operating equipment on those aircraft for it to leave the ground. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong over millions of pieces on that aircraft. Something's going to break. I'm not surprised to read something like this of them cutting a corner on something like maintenance because it often takes a lot of time. Aircraft's on the ground, it costs you money to fix, and you're not making money because it's obviously on the ground.
Yeah,
but that's scary stuff right there.
It is. As you were saying, it's exactly one of those things where you don't want to think about the possibilities that maybe that screw or that bolt wasn't as tight as it could have been, or it didn't have the right
torque value. And the more I became aware of aviation and systems, the more it keeps me up at night because I'm like, there's so many things that have to go right for this thing to stay in the air. Which is why there's these rigorous, that's why we have the FAA, right? All these rigorous inspections and all these compliance that we need to meet. It's for the right reasons. A $1.1 million fine, that's probably nothing to them, but there needs to be a fine of that size so they're not cutting those corners.
Yeah, I would think so. Well, anyhow, it caught my attention the other day when I was scrolling through because, hey, it's the FAA. I want to see what they're putting out. I'm going to follow the FAA.
That one make national news because I did not see that, and I'm relatively in touch. Interesting.
I didn't see a thing. But then again, $1.1 million to someone like United, is that really that? I mean, that's a slap on the wrist. If anything, yeah. I mean, I know it's a big deal for you and I, but for them, they're like, okay, sure, let's take care of that. I mean,
I wonder how much they paid to have it not on the news.
Well, what was the cost of doing the maintenance? Was the maintenance $2 million? And they're like, well, we can pay $1 million fine, or not do it for two.
That's a big risk reward though, because what's the cost of not doing the maintenance and then something?
And what was it? It says it does say allegedly. It says allegedly, right? So the agency alleges that the airline conducted flights without checking fire system warning.
Wondering if that's sounds like maybe a checklist item, but who knows? Either way, let's let's hope that's not happening routinely.
Yeah,
I got to
no.
get on a plane in here in about 2 weeks.
Yeah. Ooh. uh, let's uh, let's hope that this was exactly the wake up call, the attention getter. What do they call it? The foot stomp, to get the job done. Sure. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, anyhow, like I said, it just caught my attention. I wanted to throw it past you real quick and
No,
see
yeah,
what
I
you
missed
thought.
that one.
Well, there's a lot out there. There really is, and
Yeah.
that's part of why we started having this dialogue is because there is so much going on in the field of aviation and the national airspace, and to cover everything is going to take a full time operation.
Take a couple more episodes, but you're right. The news is already cluttered as it is, but I think airspace wise and in terms of aviation, there's been a lot in the news about aviation, more bad than good, unfortunately.
There has been a lot. There's been one thing that seemed to have dominated the news. Here we are over at aviationweek.com. Uh, and it looks like a hobby club is missing their balloon. Uh-oh. So, we've been hearing about these balloons going missing. Well, there's an Illinois-based hobby club here. It says that maybe it was their balloon that the Department of Defense decided to shoot down recently.
Yeah, this one I saw this. This one gives me a little bit of trouble because, again, I'm sure everyone's heard about there's been, I think, 4 balloons that have been kind of accredited with a foreign country,
Mm-hmm.
potentially over the U.S. There's definitely proof that it was a balloon. Whoever it originated from, whatever, we don't have all the answers. But I was really surprised by how far those were able to float over the U.S. without getting untouched. And then a hobbyist sends up a balloon. I'm assuming not nearly the size of the one that actually made it pretty far over the U.S. before getting shot down, and that one gets shot down pretty readily. So it just I can't really wrap my head totally around it. Of it doesn't make sense like how the other ones got so far, and this one didn't.
I don't know. I was, if I'm not mistaken, NORAD had started to tune some of their radar systems,
Hmm.
and this was allowing them to look for objects that may be slower than normal.
Interesting.
I think is what I heard, that it was a speed issue, it was a size issue, that something they just weren't really looking for was balloons. It wasn't it wasn't part of their normal search. Um,
Yeah, because all those are working off like a sensitivity and like an energy return essentially. So I'm wondering if the balloon isn't a good enough object to bounce those waves back.
well, it would seem to me that the the not just the radar systems, but aircraft in general. They said the balloons are 20, 30,000 feet. Hey, I'm no genius here. I'm no expert, but where do airlines typically fly, or private aircraft fly? I mean, private jets are flying around all the time within that
Yeah,
range
20
of.
to 35-ish thousand feet. You're going to see turboprops, jet aircraft up there, absolutely. And I think it's NOAA. I know they send up like 2 balloons a day out there, and those go up into the upper atmosphere. So I'm honestly surprised we haven't heard more stories about a big balloon, especially a weather balloon that's actually got some mass, fair amount of material. I don't know if I've ever seen one leave the ground, but it's got some material. If that got sucked into a motor, I don't know what would happen. I'm assuming it's not good. I
Oh,
don't know if they're taking precautions to avoid something like that, but seems like they go straight up. There's no TFR or anything, but you got to just kind of know where those balloons are getting launched. But upper atmosphere winds, those can go anywhere.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Right here, this other piece, another article here, the Aviation Week, and I'm not trying to be particularly biased. It just happened to pop up on the
Are they a
on the.
sponsor of the Aviation Podcast?
No, no, they're not. They're not. But they have some articles apparently. So we had to pull something up. It was the first one on the search. We have a balloon shot down reveals new insights on the U.S.-Chinese capabilities. Um, that's the one that was shot down over South Carolina, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Just off Myrtle Beach. Yeah, right
I,
here.
I mean, we can go down the conspiracy rabbit hole. Maybe that's a different. Maybe that's the After Hours Aviation podcast. But
Well, let's say it was a balloon. A balloon, they claim it is a uh, had a Chinese spy balloon, but uh, we've seen some of these other balloons had nothing to do with, or potentially had nothing to do with Chinese origination. But
mhm.
this was the balloon here, the one that was originally seen, and then it got shot down.
Yeah, I saw him get shot down, which is a good thing. Again, I'm kind of waiting to hear and get more information about some more guarantees on what kind of our response is going to be. But and by the way, Ken, your camera went dark there
Oh, it
for
sure
a
did.
second. It looks like, but I've just been really surprised by the kind of the hush on it. I mean, obviously, there's kind of news articles that are all kind of skeptical, people trying to get their first takes out there. But I'm wondering, there's probably more balloons, but also what's the response from the U.S. going to be? Because this feels a little intrusive.
It does. It does. We've yeah. I don't. If you and I went out there and we launched our balloons into the sky, uh, we're putting something into the air that we don't have control over. It's
Hmm.
getting blown by the wind. As you were mentioning earlier, if an aircraft comes along and hits this, let's say a small Cessna, right? It hits this balloon. Hopefully you'd see it, but you may not. And if you didn't see it, you ran into it, caused damage to the.
You're in the clouds too, could be an option.
Yeah.
But a balloon of that size, like, would wrap around like the air intakes, cover up the windscreens, everything. If it didn't chew up the motor or or stop the motor, there's other issues there. But yeah, this is concerning, man. I really don't know. It's all kind of connecting and getting a little bit more concerning, and then you got the FAA NOTAM system that we talked about going offline, and that was that a hiccup? What was it? And some power grids, LA's, their airport lost power. Just a lot of weird stuff happening lately. And again, I know this isn't a political uh, conspiracy podcast, but lots of interesting stuff in the news.
Yeah. A lot of interesting things. Now we have, let's see. Let's move on to another news story. NOTAM system. Not too long ago, and it's been in the news quite a bit.
Yeah, so that is good though, and they're allocating funding to figure out a response because after we talked on our last episode, which people should go check that out. We were kind of like, what's going to happen next? Is there funding going to be allocated toward? And it looked like they did respond and say like, hey, we do recognize this is an archaic system. We're going to put a team together and figure out a more robust way to do this. So that is some positive news looking forward. Hopefully, there is some good positive change that's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're going to put funding into it to update the system. The system's 30 years old, they say. Um, eh, you would think the FAA, with a system that's 30 years old, they had a plan. They were already implementing a plan, but it just wasn't completed.
Hmm.
And I think this may be that extra push to get everything tidied up, because you and I both know with the next few years, aviation and all the aircraft in the airspace are going to stress the existing systems beyond their capabilities. And I think we've seen that recently when the NOTAM
Hmm.
system went down.
Absolutely, because there's aviation's not going anywhere, and the kind of the manned route is pretty well established, and that's going to continue to keep growing. But there's also this whole other side of unmanned vehicles coming in that's going to add a whole lot of traffic up there. So there's going to be a lot more NOTAMs published from a bandwidth perspective. I don't know what that looks like, and we also talked about kind of sorting through all these new NOTAMs, but they're going to need to adapt because the amount of volume per NOTAM is going to go up per airport. It's all going to increase.
Oh, absolutely. More and more NOTAMs are being filed. It's and it's not just that there's more general aviation, because there certainly is more general aviation. There's plenty of commercial traffic, uh, but there's a lot of the unmanned operators are also adding to some of this
Hmm.
NOTAM system, and as they add to the NOTAM system, as we talked about, it's just stretching and pushing the boundaries of a system that just wasn't made for it. And I believe that that's where a lot of the urban transport management or transportation management. I know they have a lot of terms there, UTM,
Yep.
to kind of keep everything organized. I don't know if you've seen it. The FAA put out a video on YouTube the other day. I think like two days ago, and it was a video that described um, their plans, their ideas going into the next few years. I think they said by 2035, they plan on having a full integration um, into what they're called this next gen, using the next gen systems to monitor, to track
Yep.
um, aircraft. And they mentioned eVTOLs, or they
Yep.
at least they alluded to the eVTOLs getting in there, which is a big thing. I know I have a article on this. This up in New York. Speaking of eVTOLs, this Blade Air Mobility and Beta, this company Beta, perform a first eVTOL flight in New York. Um, Now, this new technology, this new piece of aviation, local transportation, similar to a private helicopter in nature, but they want this to be autonomous,
Hmm.
and there's no need for pilot training or necessarily a pilot, because somebody just gets into this craft and says, goes onto their GP, their tablet, wherever they want to go, direct to here, and off they go. Now, the systems are trying to say that, or the FAA is describing these systems as monitoring who is getting into the airspace, where they're going, planning the flight for them, regulating speed, regulating altitude, all of that, so that it's very streamlined.
Hmm.
And I gotta be honest, I'm really excited to see it. It's like watching, or it's like they're looking at the beginning of, remember Back to the Future, the
Hmm.
second one, when there's flying cars, or other movies they got flying cars and this and that. Well, how are you going to have flying cars? How do
Yeah,
you keep
it's
everybody separate?
that's a huge question. And like I think about it all the time just because of the industry that we're in. I don't know how we all play and get along nicely, meaning the unmanned and the manned aircraft and seamlessly integrating that traffic. There's going to have to be some a new standard way, like you said, where we're establishing these highways, these speeds, the altitude limits, where if you're having autonomous operations like this, it's going to have to be that way. It can't be as dynamic of a flight environment for that autonomous system to make different decisions, going to different places, diverting, whatever it might be. But the back to the FAA video, I haven't seen the video specifically that you're talking about. I've just seen a lot of projections in terms of budget and what they're going to be allocating that budget to. And admittedly, the budget for the FAA, like in spending overall, they're predicting to go down overall for government funding at a high level. And now these airports are going to have to start self-funding, not self-funding, meaning the airport manager's got to come up with it, but within that community, within that county, which is going to play along into importing vertical airports to sustain electric aircraft, vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, whatever that's going to look like. But where this is all going, there's a couple hot buzzwords out there like advanced air mobility, UTM. The UTM plays into, or urban traffic management plays into this advanced air mobility, is these eVTOL aircraft are going to try to fill that gap between long car rides to major airports to then get to another major city and then have another 4-hour car ride on the back. I think where you're going to see this kind of eVTOL stuff first is going to be inner city, like a New York type setting where people might fly around the city or to cities, local kind of more rural areas right outside of the city. But kind of where I think the end game is going to be is this advanced air mobility solution is going to be, instead of you having to book an Uber to the airport, then a rental car on the other side and get your airline ticket, you're going to just say, hey, I'm at my house here and I have to get to another address on the other side. And it's going to be one big system where you're getting in the car. The car is going to take you to a small port where you hop on something like an eVTOL. That eVTOL is going to take you to a busier, bigger airport where you can get on an airliner jet. That airliner jet takes you to a smaller regional airport. Then you hop on another eVTOL and just get closer and closer. So they're eliminating ground traffic. So there's going to have to be some management system with these eVTOLs, especially if they're autonomous, going into these busy airports, because that's where we have to get the people from, these busy airports to a more rural area. And what that looks like, there's a lot of people putting their brains together right now trying to figure that out. There's conferences constantly year-round. Like Ohio is a big state trying to push this UTM, AAM, testing autonomous aircraft corridors with vehicles on the ground to manage traffic. So you're going to see a lot of cool stuff coming in the next 5 to 10 years. I think that 2035 timeline is realistic-ish. I'm happy they're not saying like 5 years because these eVTOLs got to get type certed, and you're going to be seeing a lot of news. You've seen the concepts, the Jetson concepts of flying Ubers. Like, they are here and they're getting tested, but the FAA type cert process is quite lengthy, rightfully so. So they got to go through all those stress tests, figure out maintenance, figure out these new systems with a lot of electric components. So we're away, but what a time to be alive in the aviation industry, man, because we're going to see a drastic change here, and it's going to be extremely cool.
We're gonna actually see it. You know, that is exciting. Would you do it? Would you do it? Would you get in one? Let's say tomorrow you could take your phone and you could say, hey, I want a taxi to, I want to go to the golf course. I want to, play a few holes, right? What's to say you couldn't do it? What would you do it? If
tomorrow?
You could do it tomorrow?
No.
You're busy tomorrow.
Looking at past accident history, these things are going to take a while to get type certed before we can even get in them. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to be foolproof at that point. Something is going to happen at some point for the first couple that are rolling out down the line. I just think that's the way it's going to happen. It's new technology, but the aviation industry has developed and matured. It's going to take a long time to get these things type certed, and people and OEMs are going to be impatient trying to push it out there, but it should take a long time because, again, this is new technology. Before we put people in there, we got to make sure these things are airtight. And even once they do get to type cert, something will probably happen, even if it's not mechanical, some traffic flow management, some problem we can't even think about or fathom right now. Something will present itself.
Oh, yeah. Well,
fortunately and unfortunately, I'm right in the mix of all this, both on the manned and unmanned side. So I will be directly involved. And you bet I'm going to hop in an eVTOL and fly it right away just because I can't resist it or stay away from it. But there's no doubt I will be a little bit of a little bit nervous, I think, getting in the first couple times, but within a year or two of just streamlined traffic, people hopping in, they won't even realize it and become a new norm.
Oh yeah, I could see that it would get to a point where someone, on their phone, they're talking, they're not even thinking about it. They step on, it flies them where they need to go. They step off, they never get off the phone call. They never think about the
Yeah.
flight. They never think about the airspace, the wind speed, the fuel, the battery. They don't think about any of that. I mean, you can imagine all the things that you and I, as commercial pilots, have had to go through just to put an airplane in the air.
Yes.
And now it will be as easy as ordering an Uber straight to your front yard, which is it's pretty incredible.
What a way to travel. And thankfully
to-
for where you and I live, there's gonna be the I don't think immediate market's gonna be here where there is like a lot of accessibility to traveling. Like for example, like getting from Apalachicola to a Panama City or a Tallahassee type airport, that's where these eVTOLs are going to be fantastic.
Mhm.
Because you might just have to go to Apalachicola, not to out your location. You live somewhere in the northern Florida Panhandle, as do I.
Uh-huh.
But you can hop on. You just drive to the Apalachicola Airport, hop on this, and it gets you to Tallahassee, then go.
Mhm.
But I think where you and I live, specifically in the Northwest Florida, that we're going to see some of this stuff getting tested because there is a lot of long range, semi open airspace, but smaller airports are going to be hopping around.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, it's it's something that, as you were talking about, the federal government on the FAA side, they are going to receive quite a substantial budget this next few years, and especially with this NOTAM issue
Hmm.
that recently came about. I mean, they just decided, yeah, let's put a whole bunch of resources behind it. So the federal government's going to get a bunch of money, but the local airports, the ones that did are typical for general aviation, we're going to see some of these smaller airports. I don't want to say fend for themselves,
I
but
think they're going to struggle, Ken, because those
what's
small
interesting?
airports that don't have the funding or are in a bad spot where they're not getting a lot of traffic to fund the airport aren't going to be able to put in the infrastructure to sustain more traffic that an eVTOL is going to need. So I feel like what worries me about the federal funding getting limited, it's a projection as well. Like they went over like by $1.5 billion, I think, this year of what they thought they were going to spend to what got spent.
Mm-hmm.
Don't quote me exactly on that amount, but like you're gonna have to build different sections, lay down a bunch of concrete, install infrastructure for these things to land, to get charged, to move the batteries. Like, and if you fall behind and this type of traffic is what's suiting in your area, because you don't have large jet traffic, you're not going to get that traffic there if you don't have the infrastructure. So
Mm-hmm.
I worry a little bit about what that's going to look like. And I'll talk like Apalachicola just comes to mind. Like, will they be able to develop and put in traffic, or if they can't, it's just going to become more and more of an unused airport, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they're going to go on the downside of that trend instead of getting more traffic to support this stuff.
Well, you
I don't
had
know.
when Panama City downtown, when that airport was moved up to the where it is now, north of the city of Panama City.
Hmm.
Now it's Panama City International. It was a beautiful airport down there in the city, but now it is homes. I think they sold the property to a
Yep.
developer, and there's some neighborhoods going in. Some
Shocker. Homes got built in Florida.
yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, we're going to see a lot of that, I'm sure. But well, I mean, and it did kind of make sense. It's a large piece of land. What else are you going to do with it except put a couple neighborhoods worth of homes? I mean,
Absolutely. That makes total sense.
it makes sense. But at the same time, I, as as a pilot, an aviator flying into that airport, I loved flying into that airport. It was
Yeah.
as soon as you took off, you were right over the water. The sun was setting to the west. It was a gorgeous view flying down the beach. It was a very nice location, but I could see where they had to move it for they were
Expansion.
expansion. Exactly.
Mhm.
We're hearing that Pensacola is going to have some of the same thing, where Pensacola is pretty much right in the middle of the city, which is convenient for a lot of things, but for them to expand and for them to put more and more traffic, there's been talks about them moving a lot of their traffic up to Whiting Field, which is in Santa Rosa, the neighboring Santa Rosa County. So that they've been talking about that for a long time. We'll see if they do it. Mobile, same thing. They moved Mobile. They have put a new airport northwest of Mobile, where the original airport was, where Mobile downtown is now. But no, exactly. You're going to see some of these smaller airports. What are they going to do with the new aircraft? Now, in one way, you may think an eVTOL could be much lighter in some ways. Comparatively, I mean, it's more of a helicopter, so it's going to be just that vertical takeoff and landing on the pad instead of a CRJ coming in to land on the main runway. How will that affect each airport's condition, the way they operate? What will the EPA say with all these batteries hanging around everywhere? You're going to have charging stations everywhere because, let's say and I'm just shooting out a few numbers here, a dozen aircraft a day, 24 aircraft a day. I mean, where do you think this would be going? I mean, dozens a day?
It's going to depend on the location, but if you're like a little regional outside of like New York City, that's going to be all day operation.
Oh yeah, someone like New York would have all day. Absolutely. Orlando, Miami.
Yeah. But a place like Florida, it'll be very, and there might, and again, I don't know, I'm just kind of shooting in the dark here, but there might just be vertiports that are just for eVTOLs that'll pop up because they don't need as much land or runway, and they're set up next to an electric grid, whatever it might be. That's kind of the exciting part, is we can sit here and fantasize and try to come up with all these theories, but it's coming quick, which is what excites me.
Well, it's gone from discussion between just people shooting the breeze like us to it's now federally funded.
Yeah, and then you get a headline like this. It's not CGI models anymore that you see that look amazing. It's now there's some rubber on the road, which is cool.
Exactly. We're seeing some genuine changes. Okay. Man, we could talk about this for hours. I tell you, we're gonna move around a little bit. Let's see here. So, there was the NOTAMs. Now there was also recently a near miss between a couple of aircraft, and it actually there's a video.
So can we play this if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm gonna back it up just a hair so I can make sure we get the whole thing. Now, this, by the way, this is Mr. Billy Nolan's acting FAA administrator.
Okay.
He was up on in DC, and they were asking questions. Well, I'll let you just hear it here.
Totally fine.
Every year. I have flown on Southwest flights out of Austin.
I am seeing it come through, so I think
literally
it's coming through.
Hundreds, if not thousands of times. I actually have a video that was created that is a reproduction of what happened. It's a recreation, but it's based on the flight data. So if we could play that video, and I'd like to get your reaction to it.
Flight heading 170, runway 18 left, clear for takeoff, traffic 3 mile final is a heavy 767.
Okay, 170, clear for takeoff, 18 left, copy the traffic, Southwest 708.
Tower, confirm FedEx 1432 Heavy, clear to land on 18 left.
FedEx 1432 Heavy, that is affirmative, sir. 18 left, you are clear to land, traffic departure, route to 737.
Roger.
Southwest 708, confirm on the road.
Rolling now.
Southwest aboard. FedEx is on the go.
Southwest 708, Roger, you turn right when able.
Yeah, you get it?
sight that is, though. Holy smokes.
Man, he just left the ground.
The other guy's right above him. I know he turned away, so the
wind turn to 0
this angle, which
1432 heavy.
shows how truly terrifying this was.
I know the incident's under investigation.
Yeah, so I saw like a kind of a visual, kind of animated, kind of recreation showing, and it had the cockpit recordings.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that blew my mind was, I think the guy in approach there said like Southwest, no, don't go, and the Southwest guy kept rolling. But I mean, we're all humans. ATC is also humans. Stuff like that can happen, unfortunately, which is why it's important to talk on podcasts like this, learn from other people, review accidents, do your homework, all that stuff. But I couldn't believe how calm they all were after the fact. I mean, there's no need to always panic, but it was just kind of like it happened. And on the radio, no one really said like, hey, was that airplane right above me? Is that what I heard when I was rolling down the runway?
Was there somebody behind us? Or
heard a loud roar above me, and it wasn't my plane.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, then that's exactly why airplanes do not have rear view mirrors. It's for that very reason. Oh, that would have.
I'm glad nothing bad happened there, but
oh yeah, me too. But I mean, you can see here in this, I mean, it's the same shot. They're not that far.
Yeah.
The FedEx pilot, wonderful decision to go ahead and abort the landing, pull the gear up, nice and calm. And he was probably loaded down too, right? He's already coming in, and they know he's full of everybody's goodies and packages and whatever else, and nice and calm.
And also, good on the pilot landing, not to freak out the Southwest pilot either, because they're also in a critical phase of flight. And if you're panicking, oh my god, like, and they're on the takeoff roll, that I mean. They're before V1, hopefully they're gonna continue or abort at that point, but that would also cause maybe a little fiasco on the Southwest side.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. You're right. It's good. Everyone remain calm.
Mm-hmm.
Fly the aircraft. There you go. Yeah, we're gonna get through this.
Instead of hopping on the radio, oh my gosh.
Yeah, everyone's freaking out, and it would be even worse if somehow the captain's coming over the radio at the same time that it's coming over, and he's telling his passengers, and they're overhearing this. That'd be no good. So yeah, interesting. And actually, this happened at JFK. Not the similar situation, but it was a near collision or an incident. And what I've seen, or at least part of what I was hearing in some of this the C-SPAN, is that they're looking at the FAA, they're asking the FAA, hey, we're seeing a lot of errors here. We're seeing some issues pop up. Maybe you should take a look at that. Maybe you should take some time and try to diagnose what's going on and what you can do to resolve this, because we have a couple of near misses, and both of these near misses had airline, and it was an airline involved. Now, certainly we don't want to see any airline or any aircraft crashes, but when it comes to these airlines that have 200 souls on board, we want to be as careful as we can from takeoff to touchdown.
Yeah, obviously the airlines are fantastic with FAA regulations, the way the airlines also with rigorous training, keeping the pilots up to proficiency, hopefully most of the time. But the airline thing is it's very repeated, often flying the same routes, so that's when the complacency sets in. You're landing at the same airports, potentially same runway. And ATC is doing the same thing. They're separating aircraft consistently all day. So that's how things like this can happen. but it's good that they do kind of publicize it and we can all learn from it. But that is kind of the dangers of the airlines. Is the longer you're in it, unfortunately, I think you get a little bit more complacent.
Yeah, and I've heard, and this is just some of the discussion, that maybe we're seeing so much turnover that maybe that's a potential issue.
Mm-hmm.
Large turnover with some of the airlines. I don't know. I know the last few years have been pretty interesting, and not in a great way for the airline pilot.
I can
I'm
be
just from what I'm
delicate here,
hearing,
but
just from what I'm hearing, it hasn't been a stellar last few years for airline pilots.
and I'm not at all surprised that, and I can. So a lot of the kids that I went to college with are in airlines as well, and I've just been around and seen a lot of the people. It's not like an overall quality of human issue. It's like it's no secret that everyone's distracted. It's all an attention issue for whatever reason. But at the school I went to, you could drastically see the quality of the pilot going down because automation does play a role in it because it relies less on the pilot to have those really impressive stick and rudder skills or that navigation skills because you have a glass cockpit up there. But the quality of students were going down, especially where I went because it is a factory and they're trying to turn and burn pilots. So corners do get cut because you're on a strict timeline. But it also, the biggest issue is instructors because a lot of people could become flight instructors to get to the airlines rather than to instruct the next generation of pilots. It's solely a time building issue. And I've had probably 8 or 9 different instructors in my last few years of flight training. And I've had probably 50%. My first flight instructor ever was fantastic. My CFI instructor was off the charts, fantastic. But I did have a couple instructors where I was like, I feel like I'm more confident, or if something happens, I can't rely on that instructor right now. I have to do it, which motivated me to study extra hard and be ready, but it shouldn't be like that. But it's because those instructors, maybe aren't the greatest at educating people. They might have a ton of aviation knowledge, but if they're not good teachers, they're not going to teach that brand new student or build bad habits. And it's because it's that factor. I got to get to my 1,000, and then I got to get to the airlines, and that's how it goes. Yeah. So I think the problem is in that transition phase from instructor to airline, but that instructor issue bleeds down farther down the pilot pipeline. And where I went to school, it is a big problem that they're having.
Well, it's getting into the field of aviation is not for the faint of heart. I mean, the decisions, especially in manned aviation, the decisions that you're making are vital. And it could be more than just you. It could be you plus all your other passengers. And we certainly don't want to take that idea out and say, that you're, what do they say? Invulnerable. We don't want people to think that they're invulnerable because the automated systems have it. The autopilot's gonna take care of my altitude and my airspeed, and it's gonna fly me where I need to go. And as long as I listen on the headset, air traffic control is looking at everybody else. So then a pilot may say, well, I've got a 3-hour cross country. Let me take a nap or read a book or, basically disengage from the visual aspect. Let's say you are VFR, and they just kind of let the automation take over. I mean, we've seen it.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. And it got me thinking of how the problem further extends. Like you said, the getting into aviation is not for the faint of heart, and it's such a complex thing to get involved with. Aside from having a ton of aviation knowledge that you have to have, there's decision making, performing under pressure, physiological issues that you're battling. But when I say it's like such a complex issue, is because you can become a private pilot there's so many different ways in types of instructors. You could be in a rigorous 141 environment. You could be in a rigorous Part 61 environment, or you could just be flying with Bob Joe in the middle of nowhere building up hours where there isn't a set syllabus, which is by no means a bad thing. Each one of those that I just mentioned has their benefits. I was in a very rigid 141, and I'll tell you from where my personal downfalls that I noticed within myself is that ability to think outside of the box, because so many things were done for me. And I also built up that invulnerable attitude, and I didn't recognize it, unfortunately, till something had to happen at school. And I was like, oh no, like I very well could have been in that plane. But when they have like a very decorated maintenance program, the planes are flying, you kind of build up a trust of like, I know this aircraft is getting maintained. They have a great maintenance team. 3 people had to approve me and the weather to actually get out to this flight. Like, there wasn't a ton of individual decision making on me to get the flight out there, and I didn't have to do a ton of pre-work to get the flight out there.
Right.
Good parts of that is I got a lot of very good instruction, but not some of those small decision making. I guess kind of the pressure to have more of a PIC mentality of like, this is on me. I have the final authority. I need to confirm everything's right, because again, a lot of it was done for me.
Yeah.
But on the other side of that was Part 61. There is more flexibility. You're going to get more stick time, but you miss out on kind of that rigorous flight training style. And because I got a ton of information, which made me a good airline pilot, I will say, but not a good overall holistic decision maker.
Sure.
I hope that made sense. Sorry to ramble on there, but
it's okay.
It's such a problem. And then when you see stuff like this of the mistakes happening, it's because of this robotic, autonomous, in the box environment that people are trained in, and there's not decision making getting built outside. And I think just the way we're wired, we're like built to get into a routine.
Well, there has to be a sense of accountability that gets put in, that gets built in, to make sure that everything gets taken care of, whether it's on the list or not on the list. and I think that may be exactly what you're talking about. Like, oh, it's not on the list. Well, I'm not going to do it.
Yep.
Well, the list is good. The checklists are great. That's why they're there. But, there is more to it. And you're right. It's something that, unless it's trained from the beginning, or it's taught from the beginning, it can be something that doesn't take hold until a very intense situation is what draws it out. And anyhow, it's very interesting. So we were jumping around here. I know we wanted to cover some other things. Man, what a great conversation.
Yeah, sorry, I went down the loophole there, man. But it's
No,
it's just such a dynamic, hard to wrap your head around issue, because there's so many moving pieces and there's so many things that could go wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
Not to turn any way away from aviation.
No. Well, speaking of the general aviation and aircraft and all this and safety, right? So over here at General Aviation News, the National Transportation Safety Board is introducing a new tool to visualize information about general aviation accident investigations. Interesting. So this came out recently, an accident dashboard that the NTSB is hoping general aviation utilizes, just gets out there more information. I mean, it's more safety information, so obviously we want to push that as much as we can. Like we say, aviation, it's a whole lot of fun, and that's where we want to. That's what we want to push here, especially at the Aviation Podcast, is we don't want to ruin your JOY with ROI. So we want people to think about it in the terms of, are you happy flying? Are you getting that joy, that spark that drove you in the direction of aviation to begin with? I know I've talked to pilots over the years that, depending on where they went, they got into it. They spent many years commercially flying, and they got burnt out because it was a job. It wasn't the joy. And I for one, I can't imagine myself flying so much that I just burn myself out of it. So I'm gonna like I said, I'm going to take that ROI out and put the JOI in.
You are a little different than most, though, Kenna. You eat, sleep, breathe things that fly.
That's right.
But I love this getting implemented. Obviously, you can go on the NTSB's website, which of course I do every single morning. I go and research every accident, make sure that I don't miss a single one.
You check your NOTAMs every day too, don't you?
Exactly, right? Yeah. First thing I do when I get out of bed, alarm goes off, I'm immediately on the FAA website. But visually displaying this data is fantastic because as we were kind of joking about earlier, watching AV accident videos, reading articles, it does stink. It's a little depressing most of the time. But the reason they put these dashboards together is visually seeing this stuff is kind of nice. So you can see loss of control in flights, number one there. It's the biggest. That's the biggest cause of general aviation accidents is LOC. But it's nice to see here because pilots can go, wow, that's a pretty big bar there of fatal accidents too there in the light blue. I better make sure I am up to speed and I'm not going to lose control of my aircraft because it's easy to lose control, especially in certain types of aircraft.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't know what you're doing. So I love this. I think it's going to bring a lot of awareness, make it a little bit more bite-sized. You don't have to read through like hundreds of accident investigation to figure out what's the most common cause. You can visually see it here. So I think this is a good addition.
This is. Yeah, I agree. Hey, we're all for it, all for safety, the NTSB. Sure, we may not be involved or talk to them on a daily basis, but hey, at least we know that they're out there thinking about our well-being, and that's what I'm proud of. So
that's their role, right? In the FAA, hopefully that's what they're. It's not right. A money-making machine, Ken. They're here for our interest.
Yeah, safety, right? Exactly. Now, speaking of something, now I don't have the article up just right now. I let me see if I can pull. I may be able to pull it up real quick. Did you hear about the fire tanker in Australia that crashed and the pilot walked away?
That's not. You don't hear that too often.
You don't hear that too often. It was a fire tanker aircraft, and it crashed in Australia on a run, and the pilots walked away. Now, that's all I know about the story, and that's the most amazing thing I've ever heard.
I love to hear stories like that because typically when you hear accident in a jet, especially, it's always just too high speed and there's fuel and stuff. You rarely hear that. Let's see what happened here.
Spell the name right.
Pilots walk away. We like to hear that.
Over at AP News. Now, hey, I don't know your feelings about AP News, but here is the article. 2 pilots walk away from Boeing 737 tanker crash in Australia. Look at that. Look at that charred piece of aircraft. The only thing left that wasn't burnt to ash was the tail.
Vertical stab looks like it's still intact. They say the back third of the aircraft, you have the highest chance of survival.
Mm-hmm. Apparently. They must have ran to the back, I guess. This is over in Perth, Australia. 2 pilots walked away with minor injuries after the Boeing 737 jet converted for firefighting crashed in Australia.
Man, that must have been intense.
I can't imagine. I mean, you're in a 737. I don't know too many 737 accidents where people were walking away from them. Not that I can remember.
Especially in the middle of a field looking like this. Yeah, very, very rare, but good for them. That's a good aviation story to read.
Yeah, exactly. I know we were getting on time here, and I wanted to leave off with at least some fantastic news.
Give the people at home something positive to end on.
Exactly.
Because I think maybe we turned them off there of aviation there midway, but that's not the lesson. Not the lesson.
No. People walking away from an accident. That's amazing, is what it is. But Mr. Cook, I appreciate it. We have had quite a conversation. I'm sure we could rattle on a few more hours, but I know we need to wrap this up. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for sharing your time with us today here at the Aviation Podcast. My name is Ken. We've been speaking here with Mr. Jake Cook. Mr. Jacob Cook, you have any last words for us?
No, Ken, just I really appreciate and you having me on. Happy to be blessed to be back. I didn't scare you away the first time, but no, I love the Aviation Podcast. I think it's fantastic. I think for anyone that has a general interest or a curiosity about aviation, you're going to give them a lot of different perspectives from different pilots like me, people who do other things in the industry. So I think it's a great way to kind of have a casual conversation, have some fun, have some laughs, and hopefully teach people a few things. So I love it, Ken. But thank you so much for having me back on, man. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I enjoy it.
Absolutely. All right, Jake. Hey, you be well. We'll talk to you soon.
See you, Ken.